if the might is right regime continues, there will be surely a third world war sooner or later.
And worse than ever because of the advancements in weapon systems.
Yeah, because
aside from nuclear weapons. Yeah.
countries have nuclear weapons already. So that is actually that is really what is at stake. The way I look at it, that is really what is at stake in the South China Sea. We are not fighting for our own maritime zone only. We're fighting for this basic principle that has kept world peace for the last 79 years. And I think that's why all the European countries are supporting Ukraine, because they realize the consequences of Russia establishing the principle that to settle a dispute, all I have to do is to invade that country.
And make up some blah 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 story about, you know, once upon a
Yeah.
time you were part of our empire. I mean, that's a slippery slope.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
exactly what Putin said, that we have a right to recover lands where the Slavic people once lived. I mean, they'll go all the way to the U.S. to Canada, because the no, uh, the Vikings reached Canada also.
Well, just on that point, closer to Russia's territory, a former Mongolian prime minister posted a picture of Mongolian Empire, which had much of Russia and Middle East and China. So like it was a sarcastic comment that if you want to go down that road, be careful what you wish for, right? Because there was no Russia until the fall of the Golden Horde. Going back to this, Justice Carpio. Now, I posted something about the picture between Zelensky and Marcos, and then I called him a warrior president because, you know, I mean, this is a guy who has multiple assassination plots against him. He stayed with his own family, with his young kids. This is not a performative kind of president. Unlike some president I know, nung tapos ng gyera sa Marawi, biglang magdamit-damit siya ng camouflage papunta dyan na obviously hindi pa kasya sa kanyang damit niya. But speaking of comedian president, that's the attack on Zelensky. I mean, I find it interesting coming from very people, right? Whose idol is former President Duterte, who showed no backbone whatsoever in standing up to China, the power that is actually bullying us, not the United States, not the Western powers. I mean, those countries have done their own mistakes around the world, sure. But so what's going on here, Justice Carpio? Why the pro-Duterte camp, I don't know, pro-Kremlin, who knows how far this goes, they are very sensitive about this whole Zelensky thing. They want to dismiss him as a puppet, as a comedian, as a joke. Parang sabi nila, ito na yung picture ng dalawang puppet ng West, si BBM, anak ng dating dictator, ito naman, bagong dictator. I mean, what's going on there? Do you think it's because they're triggered, they're worried, or they're just useful idiots, as the Soviets would put it? You know, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's really difficult to understand why they're so mad at the visit of Zelensky here. And I really cannot understand that, why suddenly they've become so mad. But, you know, between Zelensky and Putin, you understand who is the murderer and who is not, who is the law-abiding citizen there. I mean, if there is any comparison, it's Duterte and Putin, because they've been responsible for the killing of their own people.
And Duterte called Putin invariably as his ultimate idol, his you know, everything, right? Protect me, blah blah blah. So, wow. But it's also that, so the National Democratic Front also released a statement a while ago. An editor of mine, because I was writing an article and this forwarded to me. I mean, I usually do not pay attention to press releases by NDF or those types of people. Just to read what they said, it's along the lines of, I want to read it directly because I find it's very interesting, to put it nicely, Justice Carpio. So ang statement po ng National Democratic Front is, Zelensky's visit is part of U.S. design to portray Marcos Jr. as new poster boy for war versus China. First of all, it's a very long title. I don't think basic journalism tells you to write titles like that. Just the first paragraph, please bear with me, folks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's recent visit to Malacanang is part of U.S. imperialist war designs to portray Marcos as a new poster boy for its proxy war versus China. The Marcos Jr. media stunt exposes U.S. imperialism use of puppet regimes such as the Philippines and Ukraine to advance its geopolitical ambitions. By aligning Marcos Jr. as a parallel of Zelensky, the U.S. is positioning the Philippines as a key player in its broader strategy to counter its, in fairness, imperialist rival China. So that's the only difference with the DDS camp, because the DDS camp will never call China imperialist. But at least these guys had the decency to accept China is also imperialist. Yeah.
Well, I think the parallelism that strikes me is that Ukraine is a victim of an actual use of force. Is the victim of an actual invasion in violation of the UN Charter. The Philippines is a victim of a threat of force, which is also in violation of the UN Charter. And both countries are huge. They are nuclear armed powers trying to bully non-nuclear armed countries. And that's the parallelism that I see here. And Ukraine is in the forefront of defending the UN Charter's foundational principle. We are also in the forefront of defending the UN Charter's foundational principle. That should be the comparison, not that uh, uh, we are defending our own
Puppet regimes
territory and
now. Yeah,
maritime
yeah.
zones, not because we are being instructed by any imperial power. It's our own agency. We have to defend our own territory. I mean, with or without the US, we have no choice but to defend our own territory and maritime zones.
I mean, ano bang gusto nila mangyari na we'll kick out the Americans and then fight with China on our own alone and then rely on a completely useless ASEAN on this issue? I mean, I don't know in which universe these people exist, but I mean, we can say everything about the U.S. imperialism and all, but clearly it's not U.S. who's trying to occupy West Philippine Sea, etc. And to equate EDCA bases with U.S. occupation of the Philippines, I mean, that's quite an interesting, I don't know, parallelism, if they want to put it, or stretch, some would say. I mean, what's going on there, Justice Kirby? What's your read of that?
Well, they really don't have any argument anymore, except those specious positions that they're putting up. You know, we kick out the Americans, and what happened? Without any American base, without any American uh, uh, EDCA site, China seized Mischief Reef, and China also seized Scarborough Shoal. So the Americans had nothing to do with that. When we were totally defenseless without an American presence here, the Chinese invaded us because Scarborough Shoal is territory. When they took that over, that was an invasion.
Siguro one argument they could make is, oh, you know, China is getting some small islands there, but we're giving the whole Cagayan and you know, like, all those. Maybe that's their stretch argument too, right? I mean, what's going on here?
Well, a speck of stone above water high tide generates a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. The radius of that, the area of that is as large as twice as large as Metro Manila. It's a huge area in terms of territorial sea. So, and China can always build there another artificial island if they want. And that would bring China very close to us.
Oh, especially if they occupy Taiwan. I mean, if they invade Taiwan, they're really close to us in a huge island, right? Our entire northern perimeters will be exposed. But just sorry if I'm pushing you on this, but patulan natin for the sake of it. So the argument I also hear from that side, not the DDS side, but the leftist side or supposed leftist side, is that ang problema is you cannot talk about the Philippine Strategic Agency dahil yung mga liderato natin ay puro mga tuta. Parang, oh, maasa ka kay Marcos to reassert Philippine sovereignty. What strategic agency you're talking about? So, Jessica, what would you say to that argument that we don't have an elite which can stand up to the US and make sure we leverage the alliance without ending up as American proxy or puppet or something like that? What do you say to that argument?
Well, when China seized the Scarborough Shoal, on our own, we went to The Hague. We filed the arbitration case. The Americans didn't even know about it. We kept it away from the Americans because we didn't want anything to leak. And we were very careful that we did not alert the Americans that we were about to file. They didn't. In fact, they discouraged us. They were not too happy about that. So I mean, we did that on our own. And the Americans don't have any influence there. They're not even a member of UNCLOS. So these leftists are saying that, oh, that's the UNCLOS tribunal is controlled by the Americans. It cannot be. The Americans don't even have a representative in the ITLOS, in the United Nations Tribunal of the Law of the Sea. So
And clearly, they don't control ICC or ICJ, which is going after their key ally, special friend in the Middle East, right? I mean, that's why they're sanctioning those bodies or threatening to, right? So I think the problem with them is they're still stuck in the 1960s when, yes, US back then was sponsoring coups right and left across developing world and doing horrible things. I think what they miss is that today's China is more like the US of 1960s. It's kind of a new rising hegemon which doesn't give a heck to democracy or the most domestic institutions. I mean, gusto ko lang patulan itong mga argument na to kasi grabe dagsaan ng comments when I posted about Zelensky and Marcos. There's a term, Gen Z term, triggered. Marami na triggered doon sa mga post kong ganyan.
Well, they can say what they want, but the reality is we are the subject. We are the victim of aggression. Ukraine is the victim of aggression. It's very clear. We are not stepping on a single square inch of Chinese territory. They're trying to seize all our island territories in the West Philippine Sea. How could any Filipino say we are wrong in defending our own territory? I mean, if you look at the Ukraine, how can you say that the Ukrainians are wrong in defending their territory against invasion? It's the right of every nation to defend its own territory. I mean, it's just impossible. That's why they can never convince people.
Well, except, maybe the 3 or 4% who are still. But I think their argument here is that defensive yung moves ng Russia. Because if Ukraine had joined NATO, blah, 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 then Russia would be surrounded completely by NATO members, blah, blah, blah. And then we are encircling China with AUKUS and JAFUS and Squad and all. So kawawa naman ng China, inaapi natin sila. I mean, it takes quite a leap of imagination to see China and Russia as victims, considering how powerful China especially is. Russia, we can have a conversation about that.
Well, it's no much. Ukraine doesn't have a single nuclear bomb, and Russia has about maybe
more than
about
1,000 at least. Yeah,
10,000 at least.
Yeah.
So close to 6,000. So why are they worried? How can a nation like Russia, with the largest nuclear stockpile in the world, be worried about countries like Ukraine, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, when they don't even have a single nuclear bomb?
Yeah. The only way I would agree with them is this, that a democratic, successful, prosperous Ukraine would be a threat to Putin's regime, right? Because it will tell the Russian people that, oh, look at our Slavic brothers. They're going first world. We're still stuck here. And to China and the Communist Party of China, who really doesn't have any credibility as a communist power, but has all the credibility as a powerful nationalist power, we are also a threat to Xi Jinping's regime, right? Because if we expose China for what it is and resist China, that's not going to look good to the Chinese people domestically, right? So in that sense, maybe we're not a threat to China and Russia, but we are a threat to the authoritarian leaders in charge of these countries, right? I mean, that's how I can see how we are a threat to these countries. Kaya triggered sila.
Well, the way I look at it, President Xi has claimed, he claimed credit for the Chinese expansion in the South China Sea. And he has a lot of problems, domestic problems now, because of the economy of China is in a downturn now. A lot of people unemployed. Their youth, a huge army of young Chinese are unemployed. So
they even stopped releasing. Sorry, Jessica, just for people to realize, the Chinese National Labor Statistics Office has stopped releasing data on youth unemployment. It's so
Yeah,
bad,
that's
I just
right.
don't want to release anymore. That's how bad the situation is. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you prevent these young people from going against the government by creating an outside enemy?